Alright, I guess it's time to talk about how masculinity can be toxic. Again. Hey everyone, Harris O'Malley from DrNerdLove.com. If you're a regular reader of the blog, then you know that one of the things that I believe that's really important when it comes to self-improvement is the idea of what does it mean to be a man, and more importantly, how some ideas about manhood are actually really harmful. In the wake of recent shootings in Parkside, Florida, actor and comedian Michael Ian Black commented on Twitter that deeper than the gun problem is this: boys are broken. And in the excellent thread that followed, he shared a lot of thoughts about how we live in a society that pushes young boys to violence and emotional isolation, and ultimately seriously damages them. And it's in no small part because all of us have grown up in a culture that teaches us to be men in ways that are, quite honestly, toxic. Now, one of the first things that we should get out of the way is that when we talk about the concept of toxic masculinity, nobody's saying that being a man is toxic or that masculinity is inherently bad. That's a really common misconception and one that gets spread around a lot. What toxic masculinity actually refers to are beliefs and behaviors that are taught as being positive or good or laudable that in reality are harmful both to men individually and to society as a whole. These ideas are part of a very narrow definition of what it means to be a man. It tells us how men are supposed to look, tells us how men are supposed to act, and how we're supposed to live.
All the ways you wish you could be, that's me. I look like you want to look, I fuck like you want to fuck, I am smart, capable, and most importantly, I'm free in all the ways that you are not.
Men are supposed to be aggressive, both physically and sexually, ready and capable of fucking and fighting at any time, being reactive, pacifistic. Physically weak or emotionally sensitive marks you out as being fake, someone whose very nature makes them out to be a victim, whereas the strong and the macho are the rightful natural winners in this society. And of course, being openly emotional in and of itself is a sign of weakness. After all, real men are supposed to rein in their emotions, not just fear or sadness or grief, but really any emotion that isn't lust or anger. Real men never get caught crying, even at times when tears are the exact thing that are needed.
Yeah. 雨だよ.
Emotions get positioned as the opposite of logic, and men are nothing if not creatures of logic and reason, which also tends to get translated as emotionally closed off. We tend to forget that Stoicism is about flexibility and compassion, not how to be an asshole Vulcan. Even the ostensible heroes and role models of a generation are predicated on the idea that emotions are a distraction at best and a weakness at worst. These are ideals and identities that are quite literally marketed to us. Masculinity made synonymous with sex, violence, and emotional isolation, repackaged and sold to us at market rate. It's equal parts man as superior being and man as barely evolved troglodyte all at the same time. Bushmaster, for example, famously advertised their .223 semi-automatic rifle cocked at a jaunty angle with the words, "Consider your man card reissued." You may not measure up as a man, but Bushmaster has a semi-auto tactical replacement complete with copper-jacketed death sperm ready and waiting for you. Vodka makers Belvedere thought nothing of selling their product with a rape joke, and the idea that men may be cultured, or work in an office, or care about such effete things as their skincare are sold to us as signs of weakness. To be anything less than 100% manly is to be emasculated, and therefore anything that challenges or threatens your masculinity is to be seen with suspicion. Notice how many products are marketed and labeled as being specifically for men. It's a way of reassuring people that you're not going to damage your manhood by using the wrong cotton swabs, or the wrong chapstick, or wiping your ass. Yeah. Trying to live up to these strictures and ideals is incredibly stressful, because by doing so, we recognize that we are saying that manhood is at best an impermanent state, and one that could be shattered by almost anything. If you're seen carrying around an accessory that doesn't inherently validate your manhood, and suddenly your masculine identity is in question. And an even greater source of stress comes from the fact that situations entirely outside of your control can make you less of a man. When we treat manhood as a performance, something that you do, rather than something inherent to who you are, it becomes something that can be taken away from you by others. One of the common ideas about manhood is a man is someone who provides for his family, but when you get fired from your job because someone has figured out how to automate it, suddenly a faceless corporation has robbed you of your manhood. But other men can do this as well. In fact, Bushmaster's Man Card ad campaign played with this very idea. Your Man Card reminds you that your status as a man is temporary at best and is something that can be revoked by other people for violating or not living up to arbitrary and, frankly, bullshit standards. Men are actively encouraged to pounce on anyone who is non-conforming. All you have to do is see how people react to anyone who bucks traditional masculine presentation. The idea that gender might be a spectrum and not a strictly and easily defined binary flies in the face of a lot of beloved, if scientifically dubious, bio-truths, and ends up challenging the very concept of what it means to be a man. A concept that ultimately only works if everybody buys into it. Anyone who pushes back against these ideas runs the risk of toppling the entire structure. And so, gender nonconforming behavior becomes something that needs to be called out and then corrected, forcibly if necessary, first through mockery, and then failing that by out-and-out violence. In fact, policing other people's masculinity is one of the ways that some guys try to reinforce their own, especially when they feel that their masculine identity is under threat. It's a dominance display, a way of showing that you're so much stronger and more powerful than the person you're accusing of being weak. Hell, watch the comments on any article or video that touches on masculinity, including this one, and see how often phrases like soy boy, cuck, pussy, and mangina come up in the comments. These are some of the favorite insults of people trying to play gender cop. This sort of posturing is not just trying to reinforce the stereotypes of toxic masculine behavior, but also a way of deflecting attention off of them. After all, who could question the virtue of the person who is loudest in calling out the sin in others? Perversely enough, the people who are harmed the most by toxic beliefs about masculinity are often the ones who cling to them the hardest. Geek culture is rife with these tropes and beliefs, ranging everywhere from the trash talk culture of online gaming, to the design and presentation of male and female characters, to the way that women are treated in geek culture in general. People who didn't fit that narrow definition of man, people who will tell you about how they were bullied and ostracized for being sensitive, for being bookish or unathletic, or for having unusual hobbies, will be among the first and fastest to hurl insults like fag or pussy for anyone who doesn't reaffirm their own masculinity in a suitably aggressive manner. Far from recognizing how restrictive and damaging these arbitrary rules can be, we end up recreating them ourselves and telling ourselves that this time it's fine because we're the ones who came up with it. The humor of shows like The Big Bang Theory is deeply entrenched in this idea. We laugh at Sheldon and the others attempting to be manly and macho and failing. We laugh at their misogyny. We laugh at the way they violate consent and the way that they posture amongst themselves, trying to show who's the alpha of the group, because it's supposed to be funny in the same way that a growling chihuahua is funny. Look at this tiny thing pretending to be big and fierce. But even as we're laughing, we're just reaffirming and reinforcing all the worst beliefs about men. Sure, all men are horny animals who will try to do anything to get laid, and if that means coercion or trickery, then hey, boys will be boys. Women who've been sexually assaulted get blamed for having gone back to a man's house because what did you think was going to happen? In attempting to recreate these ideals and then laughing at people's attempts to fulfill them, we just reinforce the idea that these behaviors are right and just and good and admirable and to be emulated. Like people who missed the point of Fight Club in trying to recover or rebuild some lost manhood. We just enter a cargo cult mentality where we're attempting to rebuild the structures that represent the rules that excluded us and squeezed us out in the first place, in the hopes that maybe this time we'll finally get the acclaim and the rewards that we were promised. And I'm really not exaggerating when I say that toxic masculinity is as damaging to the individual as it is to society. More so in some cases. Men whose girlfriends or wives make more money than they do frequently suffer from depression, insomnia, and erectile dysfunction. Toxic masculinity also minimizes the impact and the harm done to male victims of sexual assault and rape, whether it's done to them by women or by other men. After all, men are strong. If you couldn't have fought the person off, then clearly you must have wanted it. Men are horny. Oh no, you weren't coerced into a relationship that you didn't want or couldn't handle. You got lucky. I mean, who wouldn't want some older woman to take you aside and make a man out of you? Trying to live up to these stereotypes means that men engage in physical violence far more often than women do, and it also means that we tend to die from accidental injuries caused by our aggressive or reckless behavior. Men are also more prone to substance abuse, often trying to medicate depression, which is higher in men, or other emotional issues. Men have fewer close friends than women do, and have fewer still as they get older. And emotional isolation is as damaging to your health as smoking or heart disease. Small wonder that men are more prone to suicide and have shorter life expectancy overall. Trying to live up to bullshit ideas about manhood is literally killing us. And it doesn't just hurt us, it hurts the people around us. Remember what I said about how manhood is something that can be taken from you? This is important because one of the ways that men tend to react when their masculine identity is under threat is to lash out violently. In a study on masculinity and aggression conducted by the University of South Florida, men who were asked to do unmanly tasks such as braid hair would react with higher aggression, in this case, by punching a heavy bag, than those who were asked to braid rope. In fact, the men who weren't allowed to punch the bag after braiding hair began to show signs of acute anxiety, because they weren't able to use violence as a way to release the stress and reclaim their manhood. We're taught that manhood is about dominance and power, but what do you do when you don't have the power? In a society that glamorizes violence and downplays the effect that committing violence has on us, brute force and ferocity looks like the way forward. We want to get revenge on the people who have wronged us and have stolen our male birthright from us, the way that Elliot Rodger did. Or Christopher Harper Mercer did. Violence and anger becomes a way of reestablishing our credentials as men. Now, I need to be clear here. I'm not saying the path forward to detoxifying manhood is to end aggression or leadership or make everybody pacifists. I'm not saying that we have to apologize for being men, and I'm not saying that the key is to become vegan hippies who sit around talking about their feelings. There are, in fact, ways of being a quote-unquote traditional man that aren't toxic at all. Characters like King T'Challa or Steve Rogers or real-life individuals like Terry Crews all provide examples of distinctly non-toxic masculine behavior, even while outwardly conforming to traditional ideas of manhood. But there are also other ways of being men, ways that are just as real, as valid, and as good as being a 6-foot-tall slab of beef. David Bowie is no less of a man for playing with his gender presentation than Burt Reynolds was with his hairy-chested machismo. Characters like Newt Scamander are no less of a man and no less of a hero than characters like Frank Castle, and in some ways are even more so. Being a man is something that we should be proud of. It should be something that everyone who identifies as male should aspire to. But we have to break out of the confines of that narrow box and leave behind the idea that dominance and violence and sex are the only measures of manhood. What really makes a man? Heart, courage, compassion, openness, generosity, intimacy, caring, integrity, ambition, honor. There's room for the singer and the soldier, the policeman and the poet, the macho and the effete. The more that we can find the courage to break out of that box, the better we all become as real men. Hey, thanks for checking out the latest video. So a lot of you have been hitting me up with questions about texting, and I've got an amazing product all about texting coming up very soon, and I'm also going to be doing a video specifically about your questions. So if you have questions about texting, be sure to share them in the comments below. If you have other short dating questions or have topics you'd like to hear about on here, let me know. Share them in the comments below as well, or you can send them to me at doc@drnerdlove.com with "for YouTube" in the subject header. While we're talking about self-improvement, this is a great time to check out my book, New Game Plus, The Geek's Guide to Love, Sex, and Dating. It is all about building your social skills and becoming a better man with an eye towards dating. Check it out. Links to buy it are in the show notes. And if you do me a huge favor. Leave a review on Amazon and Goodreads. If you're digging the video, then you know what to do. Hit the thumbs up and let me know. Share it with all your friends. And if you're finding that these are really helping, if you're enjoying the series and you think that you're getting a lot out of them, then maybe consider supporting the channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com/drnerdlove. Even $1 is a huge help. Meanwhile, you can find me on Twitter at @drnerdlove. Join the Facebook page at facebook.com/drnerdlove. And as always, hit that logo to subscribe. Check out my other videos. And I will be back with you next time with more about love, sex, and dating. Later.